The letters beneath the willow tree. In a quiet countryside village nestled between rolling hills and fields of gold, there stood a centuries-old willow tree by the edge of a tranquil lake. Every spring, the tree bloomed with soft green leaves, and its branches danced in the wind like whispers from the past. It was under this tree that the love story of Elena and Thomas began. Elena was a quiet, artistic girl with a heart full of dreams. She had grown up in the village, painting landscapes and writing poetry by the lake. Her favorite spot was beneath the willow, where she often sat with her sketchbook and journal. Thomas, on the other hand, was a city-born boy who had moved to the village with his grandparents after his parents' divorce. He was smart, quiet, and a bit withdrawn, but he had a gentle soul. They met one late afternoon in spring. Elena was sketching the lake, and Thomas, curious, stopped to watch. She looked up, surprised by the stranger, and smiled shyly. He apologized for interrupting, but she offered to show him her sketch. That was the first spark. They talked about art, books, and dreams. From then on, they met under the willow tree every day after school. As weeks turned into months, their friendship blossomed into love. They shared stories, laughter, and even silence. Thomas would bring Elena books from the city, and she would paint pictures for him. One summer evening, just as the sun dipped into the horizon and painted the sky with orange and pink, Thomas confessed his feelings. Elena, eyes shining, whispered, "I've loved you since the first time you spoke about Van Gogh." Their love deepened with time, but life had other plans. Thomas received a scholarship to study architecture abroad. It was his dream, and Elena, though heartbroken, encouraged him to go. Before he left, they made a promise: they would write letters, one each week, and hide them under the willow tree inside a small wooden box they buried together. Years passed. Thomas studied in Italy, then moved to London. Elena stayed behind, caring for her sick mother and working as a local art teacher. Their letters continued, each one filled with love, dreams, and longing. But one winter, Elena stopped receiving letters. No explanation, no goodbye. Just silence. Time moved on. Elena tried to forget, but every spring, she returned to the willow tree, reading old letters and leaving new ones, hoping one day he'd return. 15 years later, Thomas did come back. He had returned to the village to care for his aging grandfather, now bedridden. His hair was flecked with gray, and his eyes held years of sorrow. The first thing he did was visit the willow tree. There, he found the box, filled with dozens of unread letters, each one from Elena. Tears fell as he read them. His heart ached. He had never stopped loving her. The silence? A tragic accident. On his way to mail a letter, he was hit by a car and spent months in a coma. By the time he woke, he had lost parts of his memory. It took him years to remember his past, and Elena. The next day, he found her at the village art school, older but still with the same radiant smile. She stared at him in disbelief, tears streaming down her face. "Thomas," she whispered. "I never stopped writing," he said, his voice trembling. "I just forgot how to find you." They embraced under the willow tree where it had all begun, their hearts finally finding their way back home. The moonlight between us. In a quiet village nestled between the hills of Tuscany, lived a young woman named Amelia. She worked at her family's small vineyard, tending to the grapevines with care and love. Her days were simple, mornings filled with dew-kissed leaves and evenings colored by golden sunsets. Yet, her heart often longed for something more, something beyond the hills and the familiar scent of wine. One spring afternoon, a man named Lucas arrived in the village. He was a travel photographer from New York, hoping to capture the rustic beauty of the countryside for a new project. With a worn camera slung over his shoulder and eyes full of wonder, Lucas roamed the village until he stumbled upon Amelia's vineyard. Their first meeting was awkward. Lucas, lost in his thoughts and camera angles, tripped over a basket of freshly picked grapes. Amelia, startled, laughed, a soft, genuine sound that made Lucas forget the embarrassment. She offered him a glass of wine as a peace offering, and he, enchanted by her warmth, accepted. What began as a chance encounter slowly bloomed into something more. Lucas visited the vineyard every day, not only for photos but also for the conversations that flowed easily between them. Amelia told him stories of her childhood, of secret recipes passed down generations, and dreams she never dared speak aloud. Lucas shared tales of cities he'd visited, of lonely hotel rooms, and of how he'd stopped believing in love until now. The days turned into weeks. Under the olive trees, they picnicked and talked about the stars. At night, they walked along cobbled streets lit by lanterns, their fingers brushing lightly, hearts thudding quietly. It was a love that grew not in bursts of passion, but in the silences between words, in the looks that said more than language ever could. But time, as it always does, crept forward. Lucas's project was nearing its end. He had to return to New York, to deadlines and contracts. The thought of leaving tore at him. Amelia felt it too, the heaviness in her chest, the fear of waking to mornings without him. On his last night, they sat under the moonlight by the vineyard, the air filled with the scent of lavender and wine. "I don't want this to be goodbye," Lucas said softly. "It doesn't have to be," Amelia whispered. "But we both have lives waiting." Lucas reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, silver locket. Inside was a photo of the vineyard, bathed in sunset. "Keep this. And when you look at it, remember that somewhere, across the ocean, someone is thinking of you." Amelia blinked back tears. "And you," she said, "will always be the moonlight between my days." They kissed, slow and deep, under the stars. Months passed. Letters arrived, handwritten and heartfelt. Phone calls late into the night. And then, one crisp autumn morning, Amelia stood in the vineyard, a suitcase by her side. The vineyard would be fine without her for a little while. Across the hills and oceans, love had waited. Now, it was time to chase it.